Welcome to another CHRO Conversation hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the LaMoreaux School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today Pat Wright is speaking with Nickle LaMoreaux, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at IBM, meaning that she leads IBM's people strategy, skills, employee experience and services, and global HR team supporting more than 250,000 IBMers across 170 countries.
So happy to have Nickle LaMoreaux here, the Chief Human Resources Officer at IBM. And for those of you watching, you'll notice that I'm not Anthony Nyberg. Anthony's traveling today, so I'm Patrick Wright, the Director of the Center for Executive Succession. So we're happy to have Nickle here today talking about her career. So I want to start, Nickle. You've been at IBM roughly 22 years. You've been through multiple CEOs, changes in strategy, changes in culture. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of IBM in those ways as you've seen it over the course of your career?
Absolutely. So we are 111 years old. IBM, many people may know, started out making meat and cheese slicers, and today we're in the cloud and cybersecurity business. So clearly a lot has happened in that time, but particularly if you think about the last 20 years that I've gotten to experience. We entered the consulting business. So we're not just in hardware, but we also, mainframes, but we also do consulting. We've also entered the software business with a lot of very strategic acquisitions over the years. So the way I describe IBM is we're really kind of three business models: hardware, software, and services. And what our premise is right now is that we're using data and AI and a hybrid cloud platform to really ensure that and help our clients meet the needs of their digital transformation. Every company right now, every industry is going through a digital transformation, and that's how our business model is founded, is helping them do that and unlock the value that data can bring. Now, if we think about what about HR? What does this mean for talent models? It means we've had to evolve our talent models over this time. When I started in IBM, we were not yet a large-scale consulting company. So we were focused on hardware engineers and that talent. We had to then evolve to consulting skills and have brand new learning platforms and programs for them. And then we've had to even do more around software development. As new programming languages become more and more pervasive in the industry, we've had to make sure that learning has continued to evolve with it. So I'd say one key thing over this 20 years is constant evolution, underpinned by continuous learning. And it's not just from a programmatic perspective, but it's also just from a cultural perspective. It's what our employees, IBMers, do, and it's what we expect of them.
So in class today, you talked a little bit about your career there and the fact that you said you worked for three different companies within one company across those three businesses. When you went into each business, how do you go about learning the business? And I know this is a big emphasis for you in terms of what you're trying to do in HR. What would you say is the best practice in learning a business when you move into it?
Really important question. And as you said, Pat, it is something I know we're both very passionate about. So I think the thing we all need to remember as HR professionals is it's not about doing HR for the sake of HR. It's about making sure that you have the right HR policies and practices that support the talent, that then support the business model. And those must be linked. You cannot have them disconnected. So how do you make sure? How do you learn as you go into those businesses what they need at the time? So the first thing I would say is, and this might be disappointing to some of the students watching, you're going to have to approach it just like you would approach your studies. Read as much as you can. Take in videos and content. There's a lot out there, both from a pure HR perspective, but about businesses. Learn, read the annual report if you happen to be in a public company. Get deep. The second thing is meet with business leaders and have conversations about their priorities. Not your priorities, their priorities. And because they're talking to somebody from HR, they might then go to their HR priorities. Nope, take them back up. Make sure that they're talking to you about their business priorities. That will give you a deeper understanding of then what the right HR solutions would be. And then the third piece of advice that I have is, once you've done this, and maybe you're in that job for a year or two, you can't stop. Businesses are going to constantly be evolving. Business priorities are going to change and evolve. And you have to make sure that you're having that open dialogue and communication, that you're testing back. This is what I think I know. Is this right? Does this serve your problem? And I think that's an important part of this as well. It's not about kind of learning the business once and forgetting it. You've got to continuously approach it just like you would your studies.
So you talk about the evolving businesses and kind of evolving trends. One of those trends, obviously, the pandemic changed the nature of work, but really one of the big things that changed was an emphasis towards employees. So now we hear about the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, all of those things where companies have to be listening to the interests of their employees. Can you talk a little bit about how IBM is dealing with this?
Yeah, so the first thing I will say is I have a very strong point of view. I do not like the term Great Resignation because I actually think it gives HR teams a pass. It assumes the answer. People are going to resign, and so then HR teams just focus on talent acquisition. And I think that's wrong. I think we're solving the problem too far down the funnel. I think what's really happening right now is called the Great Reevaluation. People are evaluating everything about work. Why they work, where they work, when they work, if they even work at all. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for companies and HR departments to think about, how do you re-recruit your existing employees? How do you understand what they want, they need, their evolving expectations? And is there a way, in the context of your business model, that you can meet those needs? And if you can't, can you explain why? And I think this two-way dialogue, so first thinking about this as the Great Reevaluation and really a chance to listen and learn and understand what employees want and need, is a first step. Second step is, based on what you've heard, bump it up against your business model. How does that work? Could you find a solution that fits your business model? And then make sure you're feeding back to employees. And I think this last step is really clear. You may find that once you've heard from employees about what they want and need, that you can't deliver on it. And a lot of companies think, well, if I've asked, I have to deliver. Sometimes it's about clearly then articulating the why. We talk a lot about, in this environment of co-creation or employee feedback and voice, making sure that you're always articulating not just the what, but the why. People may not like the answer, but they'll understand the answer. And I think that that's a really important part of this.
So related to listening to employees, again, we hear a lot of companies focused on hybrid work and the new workplace, and I know you hate the term hybrid. But again, can you talk a little bit about how IBM is approaching this whole issue about where and when work gets done?
Yeah, and look, a hybrid's a totally fine word, except for the fact that I think it means a lot of different things to different people. There isn't a common definition, but here's how we're approaching hybrid work. For IBM, this is more about evolution, not revolution. Like some companies out there, we actually had flexibility before the pandemic. When employees needed to work from home or work remotely, they had the freedom, the tools to do so, and management teams knew how to manage employees who may on an ad hoc basis be remote. But it was focused on individual flexibility. There was something happening in that employee's life where they needed to work from home that day. What I think we learned through the pandemic and kind of the future of hybrid work is really about thinking through team-based flexibility. Now, there will always be a need for personal, individual flexibility, but instead of that being primary, how do you make the team schedule, the team flexibility primary? Can you co-create as a team based on the work you do, what days you should be in the office? Maybe even what hours you should be collaborating and together as your core working hours. And then what work is going to be done remotely. And I think it's really important for us, as we talked about, we've got many different business models in IBM. This isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. it is going to be different based on the team you're on or the work that you're doing. So there won't be a big IBM declaration of it's these days of the week. That is hard for managers to manage. So HR has a role of helping managers think through how you come to those team agreements, how they might think about work differently, dissect work. We're spending a lot of time, even with academics, thinking through, a lot has been done around org design. We haven't spent a lot of time recently around work design and how do you dissect tasks in a job to really think through what should be done together and what should be done remotely. And so this is now the next turn of the crank of how do you really get some remote and some collaboration time face-to-face to work in tandem with each other.
Yeah, I know you've been heavily involved in kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion at IBM. And I mean, you go back to 2019, every company said that that was a priority, but probably didn't invest much. After the George Floyd tragedy, we saw a significant increase in attention paid to that. Can you talk a little bit about the DE&I strategy at IBM?
I think of it as really kind of having four pillars. So the first pillar is truly around representation. And representation, I think what we have all learned, though, is necessary but not sufficient. And we'll come back to why. But companies do need to make sure that they are constantly monitoring, that they have a finger on the pulse, that they are managing what their representation is. What does it mean for your promotions? At every step of the way, this is not just a checkpoint at the end of the month or the end of the quarter on what your aggregate representation is. What's happening in your promotion process? What's happening in your hiring process? What types of employees are actually getting training and development and being invited to courses? You've got to really make sure that that representation is not just the big R representation, but it's happening at the little r representation across the company. The second thing is transparency. So we find that it is critical that we hold ourselves accountable, which is my third piece, but how you hold yourself accountable is through transparency. So we have published a diversity, equity, and inclusion report showing our representation against various constituency groups at the individual contributor, manager, executive level, technical, non-technical. We show what the result is for a year, but we also show some of the components under it, like hiring and promotions. So we think that transparency also starts to build trust, as well as gives us all a foundation of where we need to do better and where we've got the most acute problems. It then leads to accountability. So you've got the representation, you're measuring it along the way, you've got transparency so that everybody has an understanding of what those measurements look like. How do you hold yourself accountable? And for that piece, we've built it into our executive compensation programs. So the 5,000 executives at IBM, it is a part of their annual incentive. They have objectives based on their teams and their businesses, their countries, in the case of gender. So this is very critical. And we do use this to reward those that are making progress, as well as to take away from those that aren't. So accountability is very key. And then I think the last point, really the first three things I talked about, are about representation. But there is this last point that I think we've learned, and that is around inclusion, where representation is necessary, but it's not sufficient. What does it feel like to work here every day? For all employees, regardless of what group you belong to. Can you be yourself at work? Can you openly talk about what's important to you at work? And I think this inclusion piece has many components to it. It has a listening to constituency groups. It has an allyship component. How can you train people to be better allies? And it's all just about creating a collaborative environment where people want to work together and we're all learning and getting better.
So last question, you talked about this today in class, and I mentioned what we see today is within the academic literature, it's referred to as political activism, where you got pressure on boards from the BlackRocks of the world around ESG, You've got pressure from employees about speaking out on particular political issues. And what you talked about today is how HR tends to get stuck in the middle of all of that. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and what's your role as a CHRO in trying to manage these potential conflicts?
We really are in unprecedented times. You know, I think that many companies would say prior to the last 2 years, they were very clear on when they spoke out on certain issues and when they didn't. But there are some things that are changing in the landscape right now. You know, we're seeing that companies are becoming more trusted in many societies and many cultures than other institutions. So employee bases are looking to companies to take a stand or play a role in issues that typically would have been left to governments or other institutions, but now they're looking to companies to do that. So we are seeing this building. I think social media and employee voice and visibility to that is also continuing to grow. And as I said, an interesting thing is happening, and there's a benefit and maybe a burden, an opportunity and a challenge that comes with this. Because of this issue, many business leaders internally to a company are looking to say, well, how do we answer this? How do we solve this? And they believe that HR leaders are in a unique position. We understand employee voice. We have outside-in thinking about many different issues. We understand the values and the culture of the company. We also know about the business model of the company. And so because we have all of these pieces, we are in a unique position to advise our senior leaders on when do we speak out? What do our employees really want to hear? Is it something we should be doing more on? How do we explain some of these issues and talk about them in the workplace? It's extremely challenging, but it is an opportunity that I think we need to rise to. And I guess my advice to all the HR professionals out there listening are rise to the challenge. Don't shy away from it. It will be frustrating and hard. You may even get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay. But I'd say stay grounded in your values, who you are as a company, stay grounded in your business model, how you actually make money, and then always make sure you're explaining the why. If you're speaking out, why? If you're not speaking out, why? And that's an important piece to this equation, but certainly I think HR professionals should rise to the challenge.
Great. Thanks so much, Nickle. I appreciate your time today.
It's been great being with you.
Thanks. You just listened to another CHRO conversation. Today, Pat Wright spoke with Nickle LaMoreaux of IBM. She shared her views regarding how HR needs to be the driver of company culture and employee innovation. She also shared some thoughts on how data and AI can support continuous learning to help HR professionals support the talent that supports the business model. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.